Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 669 is a conscientious piece of legislation that has been worked out with the Kentucky Oil and Gas Association, the Energy and Environment Cabinet, and consumer advocates, including Tom Fitzgerald. The recently passed Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act included funds for states to help clean up what are called orphan wells. These are abandoned, non-producing oil and gas wells and related equipment that no one can be identified as responsible for removing and cleaning up. The Kentucky Division of Oil and Gas has identified more than 14,000 such orphan well sites across the Commonwealth thus far. Because of this, Kentucky is eligible to receive more than $100 million in federal funds over the next several years to plug and clean up these sites. However, in order to qualify for these funds, we need to make several changes to Kentucky law. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would call House Floor Amendment 1.
Gentlemen, do you need
Would
the
you
committee
have the clerk report House Floor Amendment 1?
Do you need the committee sub, or we're going off the floor amendment?
We're going off the floor amendment, sir.
Mr. Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 1 to House Bill 669.
Gentleman from McGoffin.
So the House Floor Amendment, Mr. Speaker, is the committee sub, and there was a change recognized that needed to be made. So instead of just doing a single floor amendment with that change, we rolled the committee sub and that one change, dividing up the contract so that even the small businesses have an opportunity to apply for that. So, and I'll get into further detail, but with that, if there's no questions on the floor amendment, and I will go into further detail here in just a moment on it, I move passage of House Floor Amendment 1.
Motion made for the adoption of House Floor Amendment 1. Is there any debate or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. House Floor Amendment 1 is adopted. Gentleman from McGoffin.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, what House Floor Amendment 1 does is this. First, federal law defers to the various states' definitions for orphan wells. Kentucky's program defines orphan wells primarily as those drilled and abandoned before 1960. Law changes in Kentucky, which required bonding and other permitting with other abandoned wells defined as abandoned. And what the floor amendment does, it clarifies this issue by assuring that for purposes of these federal funds, both pre and post 1960 abandoned wells are considered orphan and available for funds to be cleaned up. The second issue it deals with language in the federal act covering initial grants up to $25 million. That requires the state to issue new contracts, amend existing contracts, or issue grants for plugging, remediation, and reclamation work by not later than 90 days after the date of the receipt of the funds. By dedicating grants received under the Infrastructure Act to the Kentucky Abandoned Storage Tank and Orphan Well Program under KRS 353, the bill will satisfy the timing issue created by the federal language. And let me clarify, this is not deal with anything with the laws dealing with the underground storage tanks you see sometimes have to be removed after gas stations and so forth have been shut down. It does not impact that. Tom Fitzgerald himself has said so. Finally, in order to ensure that these funds are available for Kentucky contractors and not just large out-of-state companies, the bill divides the pot of funds into three categories of contracts. 1/3 of the funds will be for contracts to plug companies with 10 or fewer wells. 1/3 will go for contracts for companies with up to 25 wells, and the third will go for contracts for more companies that have more than 25 of these orphan wells. This will allow both small and large contractors to compete for these cleanup projects. In the past, this chamber has unanimously supported similar bills proposed by the Oil and Gas Working Group. Given the immediate need for these changes for Kentucky to be eligible to receive more than $100 million for environmental cleanup, I hope my colleagues would join me in supporting today House Bill 669. And Mr. Speaker, if there is no questions, If there are no questions, I would move for passage of House Bill 669 as amended by House Floor Amendment 1.